ask you, or are we just talking about the lifelong journey into tech?
I think we're just gonna intro him and
see where it
just
goes.
ask from there. Like, say, get into what you do now, and then talk about the background from there.
I'm with
Yeah. I think it is interesting to probably talk about, that's what I was telling Gerald. Like
Gerald. That's why I go with Gerald.
All right, if you're gonna bring it up, then you just gotta tell them because
Okay.
now it's the thing. So, some people call me Gary, some people call me Gerald. In workspace, I'm 100% Gerald.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's my government name.
Yeah.
true.
So, like, Gary's been a nickname growing up because my grandfather was named Gary. They called my dad Little Gary. Blah blah blah. I became Little Gary.
I hope
until
you
I
was
wasn't
at no
little.
point in
Take
time.
out the
At
little.
no
Yeah,
point in time.
you-
was
Until
you
I
Little Gary
wasn't
for
little
about 6
anymore,
months.
right? So that all happened pretty fast. But when I moved from up north to here, Gerald just became the default. Even with a lot of people I just meet now, I'm so used to introducing myself as Gerald. It's just kind of become that.
Well, I can understand that, right?
Yeah.
So, same. My dad's name is David. My uncle's name is David. Everybody's name's David. So my family calls me Eri.
Mm-hmm.
And but I just got sick of explaining. Actually, probably in school, like just high school and then on. They say the legal name and then you just move forward. So I'll be David. Sometimes you'll hear Eri leak out, and we'll do our best to say Gerald.
Are there any times where Gerald and David are like not acceptable? Like where a person calls you by your government name, you're just like that. Don't call me that.
No.
Really?
Like I said, for me, Gerald's become my default.
Yeah.
I usually introduce, even with people that I know in a personal context,
Yeah.
I still end up introducing myself.
I think
as
for me,
Gerald.
it's much more polarizing. Like
Yeah.
I'll forget where I am. Like I know if I'm home and my mom is there, she's saying Eri.
Yeah.
And if I'm at work, then if somebody says Eri, I mean, I like sometimes drop. Like how do you?
Mom?
Yeah, it's my mom here.
told you that?
Exactly. Yeah, it is interesting though. But at this point, I think they're, one person.
Yeah. I think it doesn't really matter
Yeah.
to me anymore.
Yeah.
I say you'll hear multiple names. Like,
Yeah.
literally, I'm talking about, like, you'll hear multiple names. Just choose one that feels comfortable, I guess.
Do what feels right.
Yeah.
I think
feels
it's
right
actually
to you.
interesting though, because it does get down to like, who are you? Like, are you someone different at work
You're getting philosophical now. I
or
love
not?
It. Yeah.
Yeah, well,
No, I think you are. I think there's a lot
Yeah.
behind that.
there's like a work persona or vocabulary or something like that, and are you one person?
When you were lifting and playing sports, were you
Yeah.
Gerald?
Oh, no, I was definitely Gary, 100%. But
When-
that was all I was introduced. I didn't even know I could use my real name at that time. Like, it wasn't even an option in my mind. Everybody knew me as Gary. So using my real government felt odd there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then moving to a different city,
Yeah.
in a different place, and all they know you by is your real name, I was like, oh, well, that'll work, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
But as like now, whatever I'm doing, I still feel like Gerald. Like, my name difference doesn't. I don't think of myself, oh, am I in Gary mode or am I
Yeah.
in? But I think other people probably think that more than I do. I just feel
100%.
like Gerald. Yeah.
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 I would say that with confidence, they've melded. So it's interesting. Is this about different names,
Yeah.
or is this about like in general? Who are you at work? Who are you at home? We talk with a lot of friends where we joke around. When you call them at work, they sound different.
Completely different. Time to code
than
switch.
when you call them at home. So I think maybe like a musician or something, your first few albums or your first time into work, you act. There's a professionalism there, and
Yeah.
I think over time, as you build a brand or you can be yourself more over time. So
That's an interesting topic though. The corporate mask.
yeah.
Like, I think everybody has to put on the corporate mask a little bit, or risk being perceived as something else, something you're not, whether it be less professional, less literate, less intelligent even.
I end up having to protect my company from its own policies because the first thing I want to tell you with diversity and inclusion, bring your whole self to work. No, you do not want my whole. No, I don't want any of your whole selves here. right? There's a certain level of decorum. There's a certain level of everything that we should all bring to this professional environment. That I know what you're trying to say when you say that, but no one should bring everything here.
Agreed.
Because every
100%.
different place has their own part. So when I show up on a Zoom call in a do-rag and everything's up, I'm gonna be like, hey man, y'all said
Y'all said
I
my
got
whole
ways.
self. This is my
whole self.
Well,
I'm
bro,
losing hair, so I don't have any I don't have any do-rag challenges.
I did that. I was telling them before. That like I wore a do-rag in answering a tech question on a video, kind of on purpose, just
Yeah.
because I think that is. I don't know. It feels kind of dumb to me having to do all that. Like, yeah, why is there this stigma with these things that we do all the time that just are part of us?
I think I see a lot of both sides to it because of what you were saying about like, you know, there's a professionalism, you know, where there's a time to play, there's a time to work, there's a time to, you know, and there's and from a communication standpoint, you do need a you know, a certain lexicon, a certain, you know, think about all the acronyms that we use and the, you know, so there's both, you know, and I think that over time, work culture, especially in tech, has made it blend a bit more, but it depends on your role.
Very.
You know?
It depends.
It depends on your
That's
role.
huge.
Yeah.
Like I'm able to be a lot more casual.
Exactly.
In
Yeah.
my role.
Yeah.
A lot more
Yeah.
casual.
And it's
And it's
actually
fantastic.
We kind of hate y'all for that. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I used to see like all my developers come in like hoodies, and this fool used to show up in shorts and like
was great.
open
You know-
toe
oh, yeah.
It
sandals.
was great.
okay. So the first
Full cargo shorts.
so but here's where it's funny though, because that actually it gives you more credit actually. If you're an engineer in a builder, you know, years ago I was consulting with Worcester Polytech in Massachusetts, and it was storage, you know, like you know, a while back, and one of the vendors came in, you know, I was reselling, and he's on the board, there's chalk everywhere. He's wiping the eraser with and he's got chalk, his shirt's untucked, and I'm just like, this is a disaster. And afterwards, they were like, that guy was awesome.
Really?
Right? Like, it just validated him completely. So last story is where he was, when I was a AE and he was an SE at the time, you know, we were at a company here, a very large, when he walks in as him, as you said, he's got a hoodie on.
Yep.
And I'm like, what are you doing? We get into the room and everybody else has hoodies on and I'm the one with it, right? So it's a different things
You
have
got the
changed.
blazer, the slacks.
Yeah, they're
you
like,
know.
what are you
What is
doing?
it, the
Yeah.
chinos,
Yeah, no,
right?
it wasn't
I'm like,
yeah,
what are you
chinos.
doing?
I have a crease in
said
my
this-
jeans.
Exactly.
I'm like, you said this was a tech meeting. What are you doing?
So I was
Sorry, I brought the
disvalidated.
suit, guys.
Exactly. I was. It was me who was actually like, who is this guy, right? So.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, man. That's a good segue though into introduction, so people can get some context. Who are you? What do you do now? And then we'll just let it go from there.
Yeah, so I'm David Eri McMillan. What I do now is I work at HashiCorp, and it's an interesting role. I think in short, it's let's forget about the tech for a second. Let's forget about our features or our perceived value, and let's understand things from the customer's lens. Why should they do any of this? Right. So that role has morphed into value services. And or, you know, business value services, you know, those types of things. And even within that, that's kind of a newer term, 6 or 7 years ago, I would say, from my understanding. And even within that, there's a spectrum. There's somewhat of a financial engineer and a proposal where you're fulfilling demand, you know, and then how do we help with the consumption model, those types of things. And then there's probably on the other end a strategic pursuit is what we would call it, which is, you know, someone who is an ex-CIO or an ex-executive, and now you're, you know, helping other, you know, translating the value at the highest level, you know, so those things. So at HashiCorp, we're still startup, you know, at that mode. So you wear kind of all the hats.
Yeah. Okay. So it's interesting because a lot of people that I talk to, I get asked a lot, even just this past weekend, about, hey, what are these different roles? Like, I'm a what we call a practitioner, which is usually like a software engineer, heavy technical role, and I want to get into like a hybrid type technical role that could be in sales. That could be in a lot of things I didn't even know existed until I came to Hashi, right? You said SEA, you have kind of like this tech sales background. Can you walk through kind of what that even is for someone that just doesn't know what that even is?
Tech sales in general? Or
Yeah,
like
what
different
is
roles?
tech sales? What is
Okay.
it? And then the different roles.
So I would define tech sales as, there's a technology and somebody develops a technology that solves a problem. And the sales end of it is how do you bring that technology to a market so that people understand what it is and agree and or understand that that is of value to them. So that's tech sales, I would say, or sales in general.
Yeah.
And then on the kind of the roles, it's usually split in between, engineering and sales, right? And all of these are very big spectrums,
Yeah.
right? So when you're talking about sales, there's nothing's better or worse, but there's transactions, right? Here's, make 1,000 phone calls a day and, 5 will pick up and 1 will listen. And then there's partnership. Kind of consulting. I work with you so much now that I become a trusted advisor. Very different spectrum there. And I would say on the engineering side, it's the same way. There's spectrum number 1, which is I know a lot of speeds and feeds, right? I can answer questions quick and rattle them off, and that's here. And then the other spectrum is I'm your, strategic advisor. I understand your business. I understand what you're doing, and you come to me to solve problems,
Yeah.
So those roles, you have an account executive, many different title changes.
And that's that AE you were talking about.
AE,
earlier.
yeah,
Okay.
sorry for the acronyms.
That's fine.
But
I'm
even
learning,
within
I am
that,
picking up.
there's within that domain, you have inside sales reps, business development reps. You have, and those are more how do you generate demand, normally earlier on. And then you have kind of account executives or account managers, and their job is to understand an account and then manage it. You have global account managers, right? And all of it kind of gets to I work with many people transactionally, or I work with one person or one, account where I know them very deeply.
Gotcha.
And then on the SE side, I think you could explain that better than me, I would say.
Yeah.
You've been an SE.
I have. I was in SC for a couple of years with you, and that was fun. It was my first sales-oriented technical role that I came from being a practitioner and engineer to now I'm responsible for not just technical things, but also very business-oriented things, specifically tied to revenue. It was a big change, right? But largely the SE is, I would define it as backup to your AE to make sure you can handle technical questions at a bare minimum, and at the highest level of a successful SE, building that strategic technical advisor relationship with the customer so that like they trust you to help them with technical vision and how they execute with your product and also beyond your product if you're really good at it. That's at least how I define the role.
Was that a tough transition for you? Because I know oftentimes as a developer, you can get like, if you build it, they will come. And you just focus on building it. And now you're in this completely separate place to where you might still be responsible for building certain aspects of it. But now they're here. And you have to figure out what to do with them now that they're here.
There were parts of it that were dramatically easier. And there were parts of it that were so much harder. Like for me, yeah, I loved building things. That was fun. That was great. Pretty simple role when you think about just your responsibilities.
Yeah.
You're responsible for building. In a tech sales role as an SE, I'm responsible for meeting with customers. I love that. That was something I was already kind of used to, even just doing it within organizations, going to other teams, helping them get up to speed on certain things and implementing certain things. But as an SE, you go in with a customer, you get up to speed with that customer, and now you have that intention of driving towards revenue. So like, me, it's easy. It's easy to be in the mindset of I'm going to help you and get this done. But as an SE, which I understood up front, you're responsible with your partner for revenue.
Yeah.
You all have to produce. So there's always that aspect of it. And the only point I had an issue with, because I still liked my job tremendously. It was a lot of fun. I would even under certain circumstances, maybe go back to like an SE type role. But I didn't like the aspect of I have to prioritize revenue over what may be actually best for my customer in that moment. And depending on where you are, they're really good about balancing that. And I think HashiCorp is one of those places that is really good about trying to balance that. Because I've heard horror stories of like that not being the case and them just caring about money.
Yeah.
And that's not what I experienced, which was nice. But I'll give you an example. Like there may be something in a customer where, oh, this team needs a lot of help in this specific area. And it would take 16, 20, 30 hours of my time. I don't just have one customer. I'm not an implementation engineer going in to do a specific job. So I have to say, well, I have all of this group of customers to serve. I can't do that many hours of activity with this customer, even though they probably need it right now, because I have these other priorities I have to hit. That was a little bit tougher for me. And then the other side, honestly, like outside of Eri, who I think we were just a good pair, like we just meshed well together.
That was your first. You said Eri instead of David.
Right.
Oh yeah, I'm probably gonna. That's probably gonna happen.
It's gonna pop up every time.
Yeah.
You have AI.
David and I.
I did see that.
We'll put this on the
way.
screen. The Eri tracker.
Corey said to make sure that I'm polite to AI, so I'm because
there
it's gonna remember. Like so.
Please and thank you.
But no, David and I were a good team, and the vast majority of the reps that I work with were cool, but there are some reps, depending on who you're working with, that are really annoying to work with.
I believe it.
Because sales, by its very nature, is a fear-based thing. Like, I have to sell or else I don't have a job.
Yeah.
I have to sell or I can't feed my family. Like, that pressure.
They're going to take my boat back. I get this sale,
Bro,
man.
that pressure, as much as we want to help our customers, and as an SE, I felt like I was able to kind of abstract that a little bit because I didn't have that same level of pressure that an AE has. But as an AE, that's such a tremendous amount of pressure. It's going to affect how you make decisions and how you do things because you have pressure coming from up top as to like, hey, are you making your number? What activities are you doing to try and drive to this number? Like, you're responsible for an entire company's revenue as a sales department. So I'm working for a software company. I mean, let me say that. Like,
it's all of them. I mean, revenue is revenue, right?
Revenue is revenue.
You don't have employees if you don't have revenue.
It's true.
Nobody's working.
It's true. But that part was weird. It for me at certain points. So 90% of it I say was great. And if you have the right partner, it's even better. And if you have good management, that of course makes it even better.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, I experienced a lot of different segments. So going into it a little bit more, like he mentioned commercial sales, and then there's like, as you excel in a sales organization, you end up working with bigger and bigger customers.
Okay.
Just putting it in simple terms.
Makes sense.
And each company breaks that up into different segments, like however they define it. So if you're commercial, you're working with like smaller customers. At the highest level, you're working with enterprise companies. Like, think of the difference between, I don't know, Joe's Crab Shack down the street and like
Bank of
BlackRock.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
So like they have different types of sales reps associated with them. I gave an extreme example with Joe's Crab Shack.
I just didn't know if you knew that like Joe's Crab Shack was an actual place.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, just making sure. I thought you were like random like small business.
Right. I've been there.
Okay, that's all right.
Is that the one in Orlando?
There's
the boardwalk.
There's multiple.
There's multiple.
Like all over.
Yeah,
it's like
mostly
a bigger franchise,
right? Mostly boardwalk. That's like
definitely.
Yeah.
So that right there was, if you're working with these types of customers versus these up here, it's a totally different game too.
I believe it.
And in the 2 years that I was in Texas, I literally went from not commercial. I came in at a step above commercial, which is like slightly bigger customers, all the way up to like, the Bank of Americas and things like that. So that was really cool experience. Yeah. And it is different working with each type of customer. I love the customer part. I love working with customers. I love helping them solve problems. I love like helping them figure out how to even inculcate, we do automation type tooling. So how do you inculcate that automation into your specific scenarios and situations? But I didn't like all the other aspects of sales when it came to. It feels like I've told you this, David. It's going to be 2. We might as well get a clicker.
I believe you.
I told David this when we were in it. I'm like, it feels like you're on a football team or a basketball team. Everyone's real rah hype. But if you lose the game,
oh yeah, no, we got your locker with it.
yeah, bro, it's not good. Like people are down.
Yeah,
you're down, and I'm like, is it really worth it? You know, if you have a great teammate, you guys are up.
Yeah,
and when you're up, you're up.
Big time.
You know, that was my experience.
Yeah, mine's. So I started IT when I was 16.
16.
16.
What?
Yeah. So I'm from. We ended up moving in 7th grade to this little Milltown city, kind of, you know, hole in the wall. Would I call it a hood?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you definitely.
Where am I?
Lawrence, Massachusetts.
Oh, familiar.
Yeah.
Oh, come on.
So,
Like,
so to understand,
you're definitely calling that a hood. Why are you trying to act like that's not a hood?
well,
like you, bro,
I think that there's different levels.
There's definitely different levels.
There are
right,
different
you know?
levels, but Lawrence is definitely
Yeah,
in the category.
Yeah, so there's different levels to it. Like, you know,
aren't you from around there or something
I'm from
like
Connecticut.
that? Yeah,
in New
you
York.
understand.
Yeah.
It's
I
very
understand
similar.
well,
yeah.
Okay.
There's, you know, it's kind of like the East Hartford areas, you know. It's
Oh,
just kind
that's
of like,
the hood. Yeah.
But it's also just like it's not at a grand scale of, you know, of New York or
Exactly.
Louisiana or something like that. But it's just
But it's a fun hood. It's a great time.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
what we do-
Everybody
you
know
what?
everybody.
yes.
You
yeah,
go
it's
around,
small,
you get some
yeah.
chicharron,
Yeah.
you're kicking it. It's wonderful.
Yeah, it was Dominican Republic, USA, which was interesting.
You know, I didn't realize that until Al Horford came back to the Celtics.
And he goes to Lawrence.
He was just like, why? He was just like, Poppy, they're here. I don't know. I was just like,
Yeah.
oh, I get it. There you
Yeah.
go.
So I don't know if they have it down south, but you would understand this, and I'm not sure Midwest, but we had vocational high schools, right? So you would learn a trade. So, you know, I graduated in 1999, and in our years, this thing, you know, I went to school for electronics as my trade, and then you know, maybe it's a funny story or not, but we were trying to play Descent. You ever played Descent? So it's like you're a spaceship in a mine and you have to find this reactor and then get out. So we had all these, you know, PCs back in the day lined up for school. So myself, I mean, this is, you know, wow, Radimus, Rafi, we read IPS XPX to figure out how to network them so we could play. And then so now this new type of job came in called kind of help desk, you know, which, you know, all of a sudden now you need infrastructure, and infrastructure runs a business, right? And back then there was there wasn't enough people to run it.
Yeah.
So they came in looking for, you know, from an electronic standpoint, and, you know, all of a sudden they're like, how do they know, you know,
That's dope.
IP address, all those types of things. So my perspective into sales is, again, sales is a broad topic.
Yeah.
Broad topic. What are you selling? Is it a commodity? Are you helping to transform something? Are you the manufacturer that makes this? Are you selling the manufacturer? That's a whole different culture.
Yeah.
We work for manufacturing software sales, right?
Yeah. But all of those, are you saying all of those fit within like technology sales?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just want to make the distinction for the audience. Because when I
I
first heard
forgot
about
there was an audience
sales,
here.
yeah, there's an audience. Yeah. Well, for you, we're the audience.
Yeah, facts.
I
I'm
need to
out here.
stop
I
being
was
so
Like I'm
comfortable.
interviewing
I need
you,
to stop
and like,
being
but
so
we're the
comfortable
audience
now.
too, right? But for the audience, like, I thought when I heard sales, I thought car salesman.
Yeah.
I thought like, you know, maybe you're working at Verizon or something. You're selling phones or Best Buy or something. I didn't understand. I had heard of these higher level sales oriented type positions. Had no clue what that actually was until I was pretty deep into my career.
If you are in any relationship, friends, whatever, you sell.
Yeah.
You know, you have something of value, or you want to do something that's valuable, and you're matching that with someone else. You know, like you want to go see the who's your team, Celtics. So we align on the Celtics. But
Yeah.
who's your football
I'm
team?
an Eagle fan.
Okay, exactly. So
There you go.
yeah, now I remember it. So you want to see the Eagles? I don't
Yeah.
want to see the Eagles.
Nope.
But it's like, well, we want so you're gonna sell the value of seeing the
Yeah.
Eagles. Oh, it's a nice area.
Yeah, go
right?
get a cheesesteak. Yeah.
But it's a very broad domain. Like
Mm,
and I'll be honest with you, the hardest. By the way, that's such a bad saying. Like now I'm going to be honest. Like I try not. Anyway, I'm a tangent person. The hardest thing in sales, because what you talked about the difference between being a transaction that's selling something everybody already understands to being a trusted advisor is overcoming the rightful stigma of salespeople.
Oh, okay.
No.
Because, there's always this thing in the back of the head, like they're not here to help me. So
They're here to
how
sell
do
me.
you actually overcome that? And then it's good for everybody. Sales is needed.
Yeah.
And that's funny. I love that point, though. I agree sales is necessary. I think it's, a necessary but annoying thing. But I think even why we were able to do as well as we did was because of how much I didn't care about sales. Like when you meet the stereotypical sales rep who just cares about money and doesn't care about their customers, then there's a decent amount of those and you're going to be annoyed, right? But
Rightfully so.
you-
That's
rightfully
why
so.
salespeople, it's like, oh, they're just being a salesperson.
And that comes when you initially go and interact with a customer. Like, I remember being on calls, and there would be moments where, like, I'll be like, "Oh, they think I'm trying to sell them something." Like, I forgot for a second. They thought I was trying to sell something, and I had to pause and be like, "Guys, I'm not trying to sell you anything right now." That's not even, and that's why I think the SE role and AE role helps too, because it allows me in those moments to just be technical.
freely.
And I can be like, look, I can't speak for David. He's trying to really sell you something. But me right now on this meeting, I'm not trying to sell you anything.
By the way, to that point, it's the same for me. There's a lot of times where I'm like, I'm not either.
Yeah.
In this situation, okay. So coming from vocational high school, help desk, so I left IT. I think 10 or 11 years into it, managing data centers, mainland China and in New England, right? Really great experiences, learned a lot. But I do think that it does give you an empathy because there's decisions and there's salespeople when I was in IT that changed my professional life. They were serious about taking an interest and serious about, no, I actually do care about you. And they helped me make decisions and even understand why things are valuable, the technology that I'm using, that now changed me internally from okay, I'm an engineer that builds stuff, or I'm a weird person in a corner, stereotype. Everybody has stereotypes, to, wow, he's somebody who impacts the business.
Yeah.
And how to articulate that internally. Where now even in a smaller, in a smaller business, the executives and you're speaking the common language of, I'm not a technical person, I'm trying to help this business out, just like you are. That did carry over.
Gotcha.
So, a lot of times I do see like, hey, actually, if like it is, I am selling, but it's also like, I understand the value of what I'm doing. And if you do this is actually really good for you.
Yeah, two things can be true here. Two things can be
really
true.
good for you.
I can be
From
selling you
experience,
this. I can be selling you something that's really going to help you.
Exactly.
And something that's really going to, it's the best possible solution for you.
And that's where, Gerald, I won't mess up at all.
I'm counting on both of y'all now.
I think that is the number one differentiator for sustained success. Sustained. When you're in sales or any type of thing, selling houses or something, you can jump into a good opportunity, right? Like out of nowhere, you have a customer who already gets it and they're like, hey, I'm just ready
Let's get to it.
right? It doesn't happen often.
Yeah.
And you'll see them have great success. Success. Wow, they did so. But then they're just non-sustainable because the reality is, I think the differentiator is, do you care?
And
100%.
interestingly enough, that's a common theme we've drawn through the last few episodes. Like we talked about AI and how it's kind of flooding the market, But the difference between what'll stick on and become useful in people's lives versus what won't is the people who are just throwing stuff at a wall because it's AI is the buzzword. Same thing with NFTs and crypto, where there was real use cases for it, but we get art projects and a whole bunch of other type of data because why put my heart or really care about 5 projects when I can throw 20 at the wall and hope 5 will stick? So I've now seen a third correlation here with sales where sure, if I can just keep shooting these jumpers, I can keep hitting these dingers, hoping that I get a home run or I hit a base. Or if I truthfully work on my craft, if I truthfully pay attention to my customer, the quality will overrun the quantity, and then I'll be seen as a reliable person and a trusted advisor, like you mentioned.
Yeah, and it's rare.
It is
Because
rare.
it's-
I saw it, when I see that genuinely, I'm like, this is great. This is how it's supposed to be. And I think the big differentiator is, the problem is the progression. I want to get your opinion on this in a second. Like, so we talked about the progression from the kind of commercial side where you're hammering the phones. You're just trying to get a lead. Like you're grinding, right? But then you progress into this role where in order to be truly successful, you have to be focused on building genuine relationships and working for your customers' best interests. But I don't think the commercial side of it really trains that as well. It's like high volume, repetition, push it. So like if they go through the ranks of that and then go to the highest level of account executive, a lot of guys, they're not going to have that. A lot of people aren't going to have that mentality because it's not how they were trained up.
And I feel like to that point, as a person on the outside listening to you explain that situation, that probably happens like fast. Like it's probably like sell. Okay, now you're responsible for a whole bunch of stuff because you have a great record. Now go do the thing.
If you also have a good situation, again, you can stumble into a situation or be part of a larger deal, and that now gain we went 200% of our number. I was part of what was really happening underneath. But yeah, from a surface standpoint, you can skyrocket.
It's the same way that they make developers who are really good at developing managers and they don't have people skills.
Different.
It's just like, well, he can handle so much work or she can handle so much work. They have to be good in management. It doesn't always translate.
It's a mistake vast majority of the time.
Yeah.
I have a question for you because the people are definitely going to want to know.
Who are the people?
The people that are watching.
Oh.
All the people.
Who are
All
they?
the people.
Yeah, you're talking to the people, right? So all the people are going to want to know because they know that if you've heard of tech sales, you know that tech sales, you can make some money, right? You've been in this game for 26 years. You progressed through many different roles.
Veteran.
Yeah, and he just told me that before, so I'm incorporating.
I didn't.
26 years.
I did the math.
Okay.
I didn't realize
you've been in
it.
the game 26 years. How does that financial component work? How much money can you realistically make coming in from the beginning and then progressing through? What does that look like?
Well, there's very different entry points.
Okay.
So, to try to oversimplify, I guess, you're going to need to, you can make between $40,000 a year and 1.5 million a year. I mean, like I'm trying to not, but that's literally,
that's a real thing.
So it's the reason why it's lucrative is anything else, the more risk you take, the more reward.
Indeed.
So what's the 40K a year look like?
So 40K a year is when you're so there's a whole line that sell other manufacturers. So you call them system integrators or resellers. The term has changed over the years, right? So their job is I'm going to really embed myself with a business, understand them well. And my job is to understand the market that I'm in from a technology standpoint. And I'm going to pick multiple manufacturers to solve a problem.
Gotcha.
Right. So for us, if we're thinking from the HashiCorp side, you'll have somebody who understands DevOps overall. Well, we from a platform engineer standpoint and from those types of, we fit a piece of the puzzle, but how do you help with not only the other pieces of the puzzle, but also the integration, the installation, the onboarding, all those types of things. So
Gotcha.
they generally, you have a very low base salary. but you get a percentage of the margin that you sell. You know, it's funny because that base salary can be 20, 40K, sometimes zero. But that's the largest risk that we do
Yeah.
in, I would say, enterprise tech sales.
Gotcha.
But they also are the ones that can go 1.5 million
Catch a groove. Yeah.
because they have the largest risk. And
Gotcha.
so the groove is that they have become a technical advisor through many years. And the people that work with them are now the executives on the business side. And the executives you can't understand an entire market. You know, I don't care who you are. And you need somebody to help. Hey, you know what? I'm doing 10 different domains.
Yeah.
You know, I have a DevSecOps challenge. I have a Zero Trust challenge. You know, listen, all the cameras are off. What's really going on with this, right? Well, that person can sell a lot to them as a trusted advisor. And yeah, now you're talking $1.5 million.
So the same person that's making that 40K can also in a year make that.
No, it doesn't take a year.
No, I'm saying well, on a sale. So there's making 40K base, but if they sell, you're saying they can make 1.5.
They can make 0K base, and if
They can make
selling-
0 or 1.5.
Yeah, so the least amount of base salary is the most risk and the most reward. The higher amount,
Okay, so the percentages typically are in favor of that.
Variable income.
You gotcha.
the more variable income, the more money you can make.
Got you.
I don't think it's any different in any professional selling.
That makes sense.
Real estate as well, right? If you start off and you work for a company and they give you, you know, a 80K salary, well, they're going to limit how much you can, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like you'll be
Big time.
capped off at a certain amount. But when they get going, realtors, many years, grind, relationships, you're doing 10,000 things so that one thing sticks. I mean, it's hard. But now they have so many relationships with brokers. They have so many relationships that they start to create their own team,
Yeah.
and now they own all the margin. So sorry to be general there, but
No, that makes sense. So
the-
that fits into the category you said of system integrators and resellers, and that term may be a little different depending on who you're talking to. Now, if you're talking about that's one potential role in sales. But then there's this other one we've been talking about of this SEAE combination role. What is that in relationship to that? Like, what's the differences?
Yeah, so they'll as you get to the field is what they call it, right? So you have inside sales, which is more transactional kind of gaining experience. When you get into the field, you're gonna never make less than 80-90K.
Well, talk about the inside sales. So that's the progression. So I want to make it clear for people, the resellers and that whole thing where it's like this crazy range, that's its own thing. Now we're going to a separate thing, which is like, I feel like that's where I came into it, which is like,
I was gonna say this is
so where is the inside sales? We start inside. So the normal progression is I'm a kid out of college or something, and I
was
want to
about
get
to
into
ask-
tech sales.
You
I would probably start in
with-
inside sales.
When you say inside, my brain says like outbound sales. Like I'm calling you to procure your business. Is that the same as inside sales?
So inside sale, yes. But I'm trying to do more volume. So I'm not outside in person generally visiting my accounts.
Understood.
I'm typically engaging them, and it's funny. It's not typically phone anymore, but I'm doing whatever it takes to try to break in and at least have someone hear my message and figure out, is this of importance to them, right? So that's inside sales. Now, I haven't done inside sales.
Yeah, you jumped like almost into kind of like the
So my
reseller / field sales.
so it's hard for me to so my perspective is I was in IT.
Yep.
I don't even know, I was young. And I had someone selling to me and who was like, have you thought about selling? And it's very similar. My thought of, people's thinking is, oh, well, if you're a talkative person, or if you have an outgoing personality, you'd be good at sales.
Yeah.
I think and we'll talk about this possibly about how things are changing around us. It's very different than the golden years. When I was younger, I could experience, thank you for being a friend. Is that the Golden Girls? You don't know it. You know the Golden
I know the Golden Girls. I know the Golden Girls.
I've seen a rerun or two. I can't say I know them.
Okay, let me remember my point. Okay, so that was things have changed, a lot over time, but so it's much more, you better provide value, not just personality or something like that, unless you're selling a commodity, right?
I love that position, and I want to like highlight a point there, because the reason why I even said that, hey, I'm coming out of college, I'm new to tech, what that traditional path may look like. All of us here are products of a non-traditional path.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think those end up, the people that had developed some type of skill in the field, doing something technical or whatever, and then transition to tech sales, oftentimes end up being very good. I've seen it. What's your take?
From a larger sample size, I would say that it's probably somewhat of a common theme.
That if you have the previous skill,
either way,
okay,
because the real skill and what we're talking about, and you caught that, and you're seeing how it's a pattern with a lot of different domains, is, do you care? An engineer stereotypically can have a challenge with, hey, so why is this valuable to you? Well, here's the features, here's what it does, here's the features, here's the, but can sometimes have a challenge of, well, why does that matter?
Yeah.
Right. And all of our, we always talk about experience versus knowledge, and then the stereotypical path of out of college and going through inside sales, it's the same thing. They're going to have a challenge with I get paid to get a discussion, transaction, how much money can I make, and not, well, why does it matter? So whatever the percentage of people that have sustained success within sales, the common theme is, why does it matter? And that's just as hard for someone with a knowledge prior or experience in the field as it is for someone without. Now, if you develop that, why does it matter, and in care, and couple that with experience, I do think that you're on to something. Building a house and selling a house does. Now I'm biased because I came from that path, but yes, it is. Even now, the last 4 years have been the hardest years, I would say, second hardest years, because of having to learn something new.
Well, yeah, let's talk about that.
And so here's why I transition that thought, because that theme of why do you care, or do you care, causes you to understand what is the person that you're selling to, what is their life, what are they going through. And having some experience in the past absolutely, I believe, helps with that. Because although, back in my day, I never thought
you hear now.
Growing up, I was always the youngest person in the room. And it's very different. Yeah, when you're 16, 17, and you're in vendor negotiations, or 19, it's like, who's this? So it's very different now, kind of being on not the other side of it, but getting there, I guess. But do you care, right? So the transition is, but the patterns are still there. Like, I understood now, so for me, I'm transitioning from traditional infrastructure to now this DevOps.
Okay. And
traditional infrastructure, there is a wall, and especially back in my day, I focus on keeping workloads,
Yeah.
whatever those workloads, performant, secure, and up.
And if it doesn't
And
involve
available.
those things, throw it to the
I
other side
don't
of the
know.
wall.
There
Throw
was
it to the
all
other side of the wall.
these
Let's deal with it.
cubicles way over there.
Yeah.
It was a whole different world.
Yeah.
We're like, who are those people?
We don't do that here.
We don't, and they're lobbing these things over. Now it was also different. We can talk about developing versus systems of record system, of engagement. But so now all of a sudden, to get to that, do you care? Now I have to understand what you developers you like
these
why what are
developer
you
folks.
doing, like you think you can come up in here and handle your own security, like so anyway, to shorten it, sorry for the rambling, but the in short, yes, the patterns helped because I could understand a bit from a process standpoint what they're going through. I would call it a ticket, you would call it a Jenkins or something like that, right? Like you're automating certain patterns that are still there, but now I have to it's almost hard. It's almost harder to change your golf swing
No, yeah.
than to
Because this is all I know. This DevOps process is also.
it's going to happen to you. It's going to happen to both of you.
Yeah, no, I
It's
don't
gonna
doubt.
happen.
Here's the thing.
I'm gonna
though.
beach somewhere. Hopefully by the time
What
that
you
happens.
just said about the end goal of what it was, right? To keep these workloads alive, secure, healthy.
It's still the same.
It's the same goal.
It's still the same.
The major things that have changed is the how we actually do these things. For the reasons of it was just so much slower. Like a lot of it was based on how much slower it was trying to accomplish those goals the way that we were.
Yes.
That was learning a lot of that history has been interesting because I grew up in the cloud, so I had to go back. Working in very old, smelly organizations helps with that because you're forced to go back
Because they haven't changed that much.
because they haven't changed, and a lot of
It's
those
still
things
there,
are still the same. But the goal has always been that thing. Even with DevOps, the goal is keep everything up, running healthy, secure. And now we do it by working together more as developers and operations and having teams focused on automating key things that used to be very manual. But the science,
because you have to, because things are more dynamic now, right?
You
So
have to. Things are more competitive. Things are often more dynamic just because the thing that was interesting to me as I was working as a software engineer, right? And when I first started learning about the contrast between how we used to do things and how we do things now, is we used to do things in a way that made it very difficult to compete as a business. First of all, competing as a business, I mean making money compared to services your competitors provided. Back in the day, a lot of your money-making services weren't digital products.
Yeah.
They were physical things. So you were being competitive by, optimizing your factories to produce a certain part quicker and stuff like that. And there's still that stuff today. But now, because so much of the money flows in through digital products and the features that we're able to add on to these digital products, that shifted how we had to do things. Because before, it just didn't really matter as much. Like if something took 6 months to deploy, what I've seen and through talking to people, it seems like it just didn't matter that much because it didn't have a huge effect.
Well, you're right. We used to consume software to run our business, as a utility. If you're in manufacturing, then how do we make the phone call you get for more things connect to the inventory, connect to the manufacturing? Okay, we need this software to run our business. That's a much different, we're not changing our manufacturing process every 6 months.
Yeah.
So for us, that virtual machine would live for 10, 15 years.
Yep.
To your point, now we're using software. And I would also say we would consume other people's software for the most part. SAP, if you need a database, you would use Oracle. If you need email, you would use Microsoft. If somebody else made it, and you would more program versus develop. So now with the digital we're engaging now B2B, B2C, it doesn't matter from a digital standpoint. Now it differentiates us. Completely different dynamic.
Yeah, it's weird. Because now what I saw and that happened, and even growing up in cloud, was like, okay, us as a business, now let's take this software feature, right? And we can use it to charge more to our customers, and our customers will want it because we're providing additional service and convenience and all those things via this piece of software. And that's where I start kind of arguing, like, every company has become, to an extent, a software company because that dynamic right there. If it's a physical product, it's different. It's a physical product. But even the underlying companies that support your physical product all have software integrated to facilitate key components in your ability to produce more of your physical product. So, I don't know. In my opinion, I still view every company really as a software company, even though I recognize the definition of software company is like people whose main business is selling software. I think the shift has just been made. Like, it matters now that I need to be able to ship a feature in a week or two now, ideally day to day. But in large enterprises, going from shipping 6 months to shipping a month every month,
that's huge.
Right. You're right. And you worked, one of the places, both of you at an energies company, right? And yes, and they're still needing that. Right? Yeah. It's like, manufacturing. I worked with a company that packages meat, and you're like, what do you? Well, it's all high speed cameras and yield and quality control, and that's all IoT. And how do you now change 100 factories across the world? It's all the same. Wow. Yeah, it's all.
So you become a software company without even and I think the big mistake as this transition was happening is a lot of businesses didn't realize fast enough that they were becoming software companies and needed to work like software companies. It was a lot of them waited a little too long to figure that out, so they're going to be behind now. But everyone's trying to catch up now. Even the older 100-year plus old businesses are all trying to catch up to the new way of doing these things.
Yeah, and think about what it is to navigate that. Because you talk about what to do, but how do you do it? Mm-hmm. And then think about now, in this world of, so we're talking about removing, I echo a lot of the words. Okay, 2 points. The first is the reason why, thankfully, I've been able to sustain myself through all these years, to your point of, do you hit your number? Do you not hit your number? I can explain all that. But is, having one constant thing, what does the customer care about, right? From their lens back, forget what I care about, forget wherever I work, what are they, and so that's helped. So it's funny, I'm mostly listening to, you said you were born doing this, or you were born in this, right? Yeah. So who am I going to now to understand? I'm sitting with, you know what I'm saying? When I was thinking of HashiCorp, remember Pete Jacoby, and we were with a customer, and he's like, I work at this, I'm like, a tool company. I'm not going to a tool company. Like, what is that? And he's like, sit down, let me tell you. So I think that, that's if there's one kind of point I could make, is that's how sustainability actually works, is, understanding them, right? Mm-hmm. But I think on the other side, and this is my question back to both of you, actually, okay, because you were born in this world, there's many ways to approach doing this. Mm-hmm. And I'll make a point afterwards of this is where sales fits in, but is that in the places you have worked or are working now? There's a lot of talk about, well, we're a software first company, but what's really going on?
We have this conversation because I feel like I've only worked for companies whose use technology to further their goal, right? So I work for a financial institution now. Before that, I worked for an energy producer. So that wasn't, they use software and tech to push their end goal, but it wasn't the end goal. So I'm always interested when I read stories or I talk to people who work for software companies, people who work for tech companies, to see the difference in it, because I can tell you what it feels like while you're in one of these other companies. Especially because I've had the pleasure of working on those types of teams within the energy sector where it's just like, hey, we know where we got to get to. We know we're not there. This group was put together to do that thing. and then you're pushing the line like, hey, this is what we gotta do to get there, and then you get your hand slapped like, whoa.
Exactly.
We can't do that. You're
You
flying
know-
too close to the sun there.
Yeah, and what percentage? What percentage of reality? So we're talking about this new world and delivering, digital systems that engage better and trying to, and that's on all the phases of app dev, right? Write test. Okay, great. We've got some Scrum stuff. We got some Agile stuff. Infrastructure. We have some automation. Let's remove the infrastructure friction. Okay, but what percentage of the applications, however you want to measure it, environment, cloud, whatever, is actually in those larger companies actually transition?
I don't think transitioned, like the amount of apps that are currently on premise in the data center. I think there's very few that have been prioritized to be transitioned. They're very strategic about, in my experience, which apps actually get moved, and they prioritize the ones that make sense first, or the highest priority items, or like are costing the most as a cost sink on-prem. But the vast majority is, we're building everything new, everything quote unquote greenfield in the cloud. That's the most practical thing. Like they'll choose 1, 2, 3 projects a year to actually migrate or do a big effort around a rebuild, even or cloud native rebuild, whatever. But it's not a ton. There's still a ton of stuff living on-prem, but all the new stuff is being built in the cloud.
Swag, plus or minus 10%. What's the percentage?
Of what's being built new?
I'm trying to think of how to
I would
measure
say
it.
95% is being built new in the cloud.
And then how much of that, if you peer out and say, okay, this is the percentage of the environment. So add back in now, the core systems of record, all that.
For how old a company? If the company is 100 years old, it's going to be 10%.
Yeah,
If the company is give or take, it's going to be 10% that's in the cloud. If a company is new, it's going to be 100%. If a company's been spun up within the last decade, it's probably 100% cloud. But if it's 100 years,
what would you say?
I'm out in that same way. He's thinking, this is the largest financial institution in the Americas. This is a very large standing company. We're probably around like 10 to 15%.
And I would argue that in finance, you're really a tech company. What are you selling now? You don't.
That's true. You're selling selling zeros and ones.
You sell software,
I'm telling you
right?
access to zeros and ones.
Exactly. I'm
That's
interacting with
Hey man, your app says you got this. Can you prove it? Can you touch it?
So-
Not so much. But this
so-
software says you
yeah.
have this.
So I think change, and this is what I think is the hardest challenge. When you've had any, maybe this is a declarative statement, but when you've had success as a business or a person, right? So the financial institution that you're talking about is very successful. The energies company, it's a regulated environment, so it's pretty interesting.
Right.
What's the competition? But successful. We in our personal careers, have been successful.
Indeed.
And the sustainability of that, though, we all talk about the blockbusters, and we talk about sales reps who, crushed it one year, and then 5 years later, they're a manager or something, but it's not sustainable, right? Yeah. It's the hard part of continuous knowledge. What we're talking about, applying knowledge to your experience, and it's hard to not do things the same way when there was success, because you're taught, okay, well, that was successful, then it's going to be successful now. So I think in the middle of all of this, take away technology, take away sales, take away any of those things, there's like a human attribute that goes through all of it. As a business, there's a human element to the business that goes through all of it. Like, can you change?
And you think that remains through the automation, through the change as companies look to cut costs and
I'm going to explain,
become more efficient?
Some of, so my job now is I talk with a lot of different businesses, much more than when I was an account executive. And the change elements are from a value standpoint, right? The common theme I see is, and this is a story that I have came up with, right, is my air conditioner, my HVAC at my house. right? And so that tangent was, I see all these patterns and then try to think of illustrations that meet those patterns. So when you talk about automation and removing friction, the thing to remember that has hit me is that the business is already doing something.
Yeah.
Sometimes we come in like it's impossible to, if you don't automate and if you don't do things our way, it's impossible. How are you even delivering an application? How are you even, right? Well, the AC at my house, the air conditioner, was like 20 years old, you know, and it would never reach 71. It would reach 72, 73. My wife is mad at me, you know, and it would always break on the hottest day.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. But it worked kind of. And the fix when the AC guy comes or girl, whoever, right? They're like, okay, well, it's $500. Now, or, you know, but you should get a new one. It's better.
Yeah.
That's 10,000. Which one you think I'm picking?
$500.
Yeah.
You would get two new ones, babe.
Yeah. 100%. Big time.
Depends.
He would
Big
get
time.
He would get two new
I
ones.
like my house of
He would
70s.
get
So.
All right.
Okay, so the point is when you're talking automation, it's still kind of working. It's a problem, but how big of a problem is it?
True.
Now, it wasn't until somebody we know, Ernest, I don't know, he's from Ohio if you ever met him, but he's like, well, wait a second, like, how much is your energy bill? I mean, what are you talking about? Now, this has been going on for 2-3 years. This thing is 20 years old, but it's $500 a pop. Hey, we'll figure it out. I'm not spending 10 grand.
Yeah.
And then, my wife, she handles all that. I can't do she pays all the bills, everything. So it's like $500 in August. Oh, and then he's like, man, these things are $50 now a month. Okay, so the problem was big enough.
Yeah.
Now for me to fork up the $10,000. And it wasn't until I understood that it was a big enough problem until I changed stuff. So the tangent is, what I see as a pattern is you are developing an application. You agree that it's not efficient. You agree that it can get better. But you have 9,000, right? We'll just throw a body at this, or we'll just throw a project at this. It better be a big enough problem, because now, while I still need to get the thing through, you're asking me to make another factory, learn, change, and it's hard. So it better be a big enough problem.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting point, because we go through that a lot in Agile as well, to where like I'll walk into a work group and their way of working, they're pushing out software kind of sometimes, but it's just like hammering a nail, square peg, all these horrible things going on. And there's a joke where it's like a caveman and he has like a square block that he's trying to roll up a hill, and the guy next to him has the regular wheel. He's like, hey man, if you take a second and stop and use this, it'll be easy. He said, I don't have time to stop and find new ways to do it. Keeps pushing it up. But to that same point, we get frustrated as Agilists because you're like, the problem's right there in front of you. You two might have a similar situation to where you're walking into like, hey, look, I can grow your numbers. I could help you reach these new depths. And the issue and the problem is right there in front of you. But how big a problem is it? Is it worth the new undertaking? Is it worth stopping what you're doing to get the wheel? So that
if you're only doing one wheel, then don't.
And
but if you're doing 20,000 wheels, then stop.
Yeah, you need to stop. Get the other one.
Yeah.
For certain people, I think this is a really easy problem. It's funny, like, now thinking back on this, right? Because when I first came on the Hashi, the answer to that problem, how big of a problem this was, it seemed like it should be obvious to me. And then working with customers, it was so blaringly obvious that it wasn't obvious to them. And I'm like, oh, okay. So you don't really understand what you're spending your money on.
Yeah.
To this point, just like in the HVAC, you don't understand what you're spending your money on. All right, that's interesting. You're a business who tries to get a profit, right? But just like a human person isn't necessarily thinking about all the things with their HVAC, a business isn't going to be thinking about all the things and how they're spending their money and where that actually makes up on the back end if you change your approach. So I've had to paint with customers countless times, like, okay, you're doing this way. Let's take it from as simple of a metric of man hours. How many man hours are you spending on this task? Okay, so you like the outcome that this application is producing, and you want to make more. So you're going to need to spend those man hours doing it this way more times, N times. You want 10 more of these, you got to do it 10 times.
Yeah.
Which means this is taking up 50% of this person's job right now. Which means if you want it 10 more times, you're going to need 5 more people.
Exactly.
Getting paid as much as this person. So that's also, those just like, that's the lowest hanging fruit.
Yeah.
Let alone, hey, if you actually did change your approach, instead of pushing out this application and the features and having to spend all this time on infrastructure and making it so you can deploy every 90 days now, you could safely feel comfortable deploying every 2 weeks if you wanted to. How does that translate now to your customer's ability to consume value in the form of software features?
And your ability to pivot if your assumptions were incorrect.
Yeah. Not let alone the impacts it has on developer velocity, the ability for your workers to actually come in, get their work done fast, and feel good about their work.
Yeah.
How does that affect your retention and churn of your employees? Like, this can go as deep as you want it to go, type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I was astonished when I first came in, and I was like, they're so detached
Yeah.
from the impact of the decisions you make and what you choose to automate and what you don't choose to automate.
Yeah. So the ultimate, where we all, I would argue, right? So, there's this detachment between sales and a customer. I don't, being in both worlds, I'm like, no. If you do it right, right. But we all need to measure, in my mind, if you're dealing with any change, so that you understand how big of a challenge is the change worth it, number one. And then number two, we all, and this is somewhat of the role now, but we all need to understand how to express that.
Yeah.
So the terms that Gerald was just saying, right? Like, why does this matter to the business? Mm-hmm. And my argument is if we can express that on the sales side, then you are a trusted advisor, SEAE, some of those terms. But also on the customer side, remember I was a customer and somebody helped me to quantify what I'm doing.
Exactly.
So when I walk internally for my review for the year or things like that, I'm like, hey, I didn't do 10 projects that were on time. I impacted 1,000 developers this year.
That's a that's a really
and if you take 1,000 developers and fully burdened, let's say health insurance, everything, $200,000 a year, some average. Yeah. And then, I impacted them by 1% this year. So I was worth, I'm not going to do the math quick, $1 million to you this year. Right. So how do you express, right? Mm-hmm. And is that selling?
Absolutely. Yeah. The more you explain that, I thought to myself, something you said earlier in the discussion about us all being sellers, regardless if it's friendships or at work. And as I walk into these business units, Kanban has a technique that they ask you to identify the external and internal pain points, right? Mm-hmm. Because a lot of these companies have no interest in Agile, but there's a directive that came down from the top and they're just like, we have to do this by 2025. And then they shuttle me in there and I'm like, hey guys, I'm here to help. And they're like, oh, everything's fine. We don't need you. Don't worry about it. Until you start having those discussions. All right, well, what about the system itself bothers you? No, everything is fine, but the developers, they don't really talk to us that much. And you're like, okay. Well, what about the external point? They're like, oh no, everything's fine. We release every 6 months, but sometimes the customers don't kind of like it. And you're just like, oh, okay. So if I can fix 2 of those things, will you let me fix other stuff? Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure, but it's done. And it's those small things that build up that reputation, that trust, and it allows you to affect the entire system. To where I had never really thought about it as a sales pitch in that same thought process. Because in my current role, I'm like a rogue agent. They just drop me into random business units and then I just try to Rambo my way through the forest and try to fix stuff. But going through talking to CIOs, talking to senior leadership in that same manner to say, how can I I'll give you a perfect example. When I walked into my current business unit, I am one of 3 people who live and work in Charlotte. We got about 4 or 5 people in Scranton. We got about 50 in Chennai. And then we have all
Where's
of our...
Chennai?
Is that India? I think
Oh,
Chennai
that's
is
cool.
India.
I'm not
Oh, that's
sure.
cool.
And all of our product management, which was like a large bottleneck, is in California. So if I'm working with India teams whose their day starts around 10 p.m. our time, by the time I get on a call with them at 7 a.m. to try to take use of their day, you mean it's 4 a.m. in California when you guys are having conversations? I have a PM who's fighting me. Oh, we don't want to use this whole new address, new workflow. I don't want to change anything. What do I need this new meeting for? I said, oh, and I'm doing the math. I said, wait, it's 5 o'clock in the morning where you are. Well, yeah, I'm always up at 4 for these meetings. I said, if you show up to this one meeting at 1 o'clock once a week, you'll never have to wake up at 4 a.m. again. She never missed a meeting again after that. But it's finding those pain points. It's finding those things to sell that really helps you take, because you care about the quality and the product that you're giving off.
But the only way that you're able to do that is if you have enough knowledge, experience, whatever, both of what she's going through to know, right? So now I'm going to flip this back on both of you, right? From the perspective, from my perspective, right? Like, let's now look at, all of the tech salespeople already. Right? I guess you said that was a person.
Yeah, that's your camera.
Okay.
That's your
Hi,
camera.
How you doing? But we'd like to understand. Okay, so we've been selling 5-10 years, had some success in any of these domains, right? Call it infrastructure, call it security. 5-10 years, you're looking at security more from a system of record. Firewalls, things like that, and call it dev, right? So now all of a sudden, we need to now learn these different domains and learn this new, right? What I think I have an answer to this, but I'm curious. What path do we take so that we can understand what you're doing, so that we can extract, like you were saying, now that I'm hearing you, I kind of understand it. Here's the, what I'm saying, here's the few, okay, this is why this is valuable to you. So what's the, I'm not going to go back and code.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying? Like, what do I do?
I don't think you need to code to understand how the job, like what is the valuable item that engineers are trying to produce, and then work backwards to reverse engineer how they produce those valuable items. Right? There's skills, techniques, practices around how each valuable item is produced. And then say, okay, which ones, like you're saying, are the hardest, right? Because engineers are going to focus by nature a lot of time on just engineering. And it's harder to find engineers who can zoom out enough to actually say, hey, y'all, we're maybe should do this a little bit differently. And then zoom out a little bit more to be like, this could actually impact the business in XYZ. So I think people in you all's roles can help by even coaching people who are like in my roles, like SEs and things like that, who maybe are getting hyper-focused on the tech, because the tech is fun. It's nice. It feels comfortable, right? We all get caught up in our comfortable things. But you have to help them see and understand, hey, we need to pause to even make sure we're solving the right problem. And then if we are solving the right problem, how are we solving it the right way?
This has been, so now and there's many people who have sold or been in this industry a lot longer than me, but we did the math earlier, 26 years. And that was a leading question.
Yeah.
Because to me, what we're seeing as a pattern is the people that are willing on either side to understand, the other side of the fence. The engineer who actually does talk to a salesperson and says, hey, why is this important, what I'm doing?
Yeah.
The salesperson who does talk to the engineer and say, you know what, I'm just entering this field, right? What are you doing? What do you do? What's important to you? I mean, how many times prior, and that's now with people who were born in it. What are their experiences? That kind of advisory role, that's what makes. So you talk about $1 million, $1.5 million or whatever, that's the key attribute of sustainability.
Yeah.
And both both on the business side, you becoming of value to your business. That's
Absolutely.
how your raises happen. That's how your promotions happen. Or the manufacturer may hire you.
Yeah.
You know, that's what happened with, in my case, you know, I'm going to say this one story really quick in terms of caring. You know, so I'm a young whippersnapper,
Indeed.
you know,
Yeah.
and this is one of the most successful reps in the sales rep, you know, sales, all that
account
traditional
executive
path,
sales
all
rep,
that
yeah.
traditional path, never Scott Winslow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And he is now, he sees, you know, hey, I'm going to take an interest in this, right? And he's helping me understand the value. Matter of fact, when he was selling me something and I said I didn't want it, he found out I was he called me. This is EMC for the, you know, for people to understand it. I was like, hey, I'm going to go with EMC. This is back in like early 90s. It's an easier option. If I put that on my resume,
Yeah.
I'm going to look better, you know? And then he's got a better disruptive technology. And I'm like, no, I'm like, and he calls me and he's like, hey, you know, like, do you understand, you know, and he's helped me understand it. $600 a month for the HVAC. Okay. Here's the point. I get it. I talk internally. Yes, we did it. And I translated that to the business. Now I'm at the table on the business end. He starts a reseller. He drives from where the Red Sox play, Back Bay,
Yeah.
to Lawrence with a bottle of wine and helps my wife and I, who go from a fixed income,
Yeah.
you know, back at the time, you know, 60, 70K, you
Yeah.
know, and
Yeah.
we're
It's
like,
good money back then.
we've
Yeah,
made
exactly.
it, you know, I mean,
Comfy.
where I come from,
Yeah. Comfy.
Fantastic.
yeah.
Yeah.
To you're gonna go to this variable income, you know, and it's my wife and my daughter of, you know, 30K, I think it was 25K risk.
Yeah.
Risk, and I'm in his living room now, right? So here's the point: the impact, and I do think about this a lot. I can say that now, as on the sales side, I can name people who are now CIOs, who are now CROs, who I was serious about, like, no, this is valuable to you. Right. And now, you know, Scott runs a very successful reseller business. And, you know, for me, he got me out of, you know, I don't have to lock my car anymore. You know, it's a nice feeling. Right. So I'm not sure if but I think my declarative statement is exactly what you said you got to trust somebody and you got to continuously improve. And the only way to do that, to actually care about somebody, is to understand what they're going through. So, you know, I'll take any to a steak dinner right now to understand what you're going through, because it's so valuable to me.
Absolutely.
And also give your sales rep a chance. You can kind of tell who's in it for, you know, but if they're not, give them a chance. Like, there's a lot that do care.
No, I think that there's a lot
Gerald?
of good intentions.
He was my customer.
Yeah, there's a lot that do have good intentions, that do care, and there's some that don't. I think
on all of the sides.
On all of the sides, as a sales rep, if I'm talking, the ones that at least that I had good experience with, talked a lot less, listened a lot more, asked questions, didn't make a whole lot of declarations without understanding the context of who you're talking to. And that's just effective relationship building in my mind. Like, sales, at a certain point, we talk about sales and how important relationships are, yet it seems like a lot of salesmen forget the fundamentals of how to build a good relationship, which is you walk into a room, you actually listen, you actually try to understand, then you give, if you're going to give any advice, you give it based on that context. If you just walk in giving a pitch, oftentimes it gets lost in translation that you care, right? And if you don't know how to care, which I think was a large portion of what you were talking about earlier, if you don't know how to care because you don't have any understanding of what this person does, then do what you said. You need to get to know those people, get that person. Like what you did, actually. Before I even was your partner, we had a relationship. Before I was your SE, you came to me and would talk, and you said, oh, hey, Come here, be around these people. Let me ask you this question. How does this work? Why does this work that way? Why do you approach it? And then now you're able to build new context. But as a sales rep, what I see is they get so caught up in the grind. And this isn't a judgment of any concern. It just makes it makes you so much less effective if you don't learn how to pause, push the fear a little bit to the side for a moment, listen, and then build on top of that.
And I'll ask you this question as well, because Gerald and I come from the same age group. You come from the early, I think if I'm doing my math correctly, like the very beginnings of said age group, right? But you still grew up in a time where people had to talk to each other. People had to rely on each other from a physical relationship basis. As you progress through your career and you see people who come up at the tail end of our generation who lost that personal connectivity, who haven't had to build personal relationships outside of a screen or a telephone or those types of things, do you feel like that empathy gets lost amongst new SEs or new people in those same businesses?
Well, I have an opinion on that.
Yeah, we've been going back and forth on that one for a long time.
Yeah.
Can you be remote? Prior to COVID, I was much more on the angle of in-person matters. And what we were talking about earlier about the stereotypical engineer and stereotypical salesperson.
Yeah.
That's some of the challenge. A stereotypical engineer just wants to talk and interface with his or her tech and just be like, I'm done with it. And then same on the other side. I just want to sell and then I'm done with it.
Yeah.
It's a common problem.
Okay.
I will say that after COVID, when we were forced into 2 years, that you can now, where we all kind of, you can develop a relationship. What do we mean by develop a relationship? I actually do care about what you're doing.
Yeah.
I actually do want to understand how to help you. And then vice versa. Yes, I do think now, and it's something that we're talking about, like, I've thought about, I have a very different platform now than I used to as an individual contributor. And it really is teaching me a lot. And, I've thought about if you went and redid this now in this modern world where I can't connect with the two of you, that steak dinner thing, so we joke around that was my day. We go, you guys, steak dinner, I'm done work, get out my face. It's a different, you're right. Like it's an insightful question. So I think both is ideal, but I think the common thread, in person or not, which I think is even more so now due to remote workers in general, is if you care, then it'll transcend either one of those. That would be my answer.
Yeah, I always view the question as just, can you make money having to build relationships remote? Can you sell software remotely, which requires you to build these relationships, thus remotely? I say yes, because we did it. First of all, we did a good amount. We did a lot of it. We didn't have a choice. We did it. But also, I was saying it before, just because, sales has all this history of how it was used to be done. Like I said, it was the steak dinners, it was all that, and that's still. I'm not saying that's zero. I have always said, and I still think that it's just dramatically less than what it used to have to be.
Okay.
Like, we have, for example, I've heard from different reps, like they're going out almost every other day or daily, wining and dining customers, doing their thing, right? And they had a lot of success that way. And I think that's great. Then I have those folks who have been in the industry coming to me like, hey, we got to be in front of them. We got to talk. Like, now they think that is what the success is. And I'm like, no, that's not what the success was. You built a genuine relationship. In our generation, building genuine relationships remotely is a lot more comfortable. It's Absolutely. A lot easier. We understand the dynamic of what it means to build a remote relationship. It's not new. It's not different. It doesn't feel weird or icky, right? It feels like, oh, no, this is just normal how we do stuff. Now, I'm not saying it's zero.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying, but okay.
I think this is the most awkward that will ever be because you have like the shift is coming. It's already on this point where you have those 20 to 35-year-old young up and coming business people who still are interfacing with people who have been in this industry in their late 50s and 60s because they have controlling interests. In the next 10 years, that will be the next thing to where it'll be the people who feel comfortable with those type of interactions.
I think that's the answer because as you were talking, I was thinking it depends who you're selling to.
Yeah.
Right. If you're selling to a practitioner, as we call it, or someone more kind of engineering, then that's how you engage with them. Mm-hmm. But you mentioned a good word, shift, because for right now, when whatever you're selling to with that practitioner, with whatever you're selling to when that becomes a big enough business problem, you're no longer selling to that practitioner. Now Indeed. You're selling to experience. We'll use that dude. This is a $50 million problem.
Yeah.
And so I do agree on the shift.
No, I agree, but
you better know how to do both.
Fair. This is hard for people. Hold on, this is hard for people to understand because this is how it used to look tactically, right? Mm-hmm. I have reps be like, we can't feel like they can't make a sale unless we're going to see the customer, 3 or 4 times a quarter. Mm-hmm. A quarter being a 3-month segment of time. So I think that's nonsense. I don't think that makes sense. I work in a completely remote company that runs an entire business. I meet with all of my colleagues once or twice a year. Like we may see each other in person once or twice a year. Yeah. We still build those relationships remotely. Now, do I think once, twice a year, maybe even once every 6 months, it's a good idea to go and see your customers and do something in person with them? Yeah, I do. I don't think it's necessary to go to a customer once, even once a month, and see them in person. It's not necessary. Use those in-person events as strategic moments where it makes sense for us to go here because we're trying to solve something specific that can benefit from in-person, connection. Yeah. Use it strategically. That's not the default requirement anymore. And it used to be, I think. So that's a shift. That's what I mean by not zero. Because I would be working with some reps and they would be like, okay, yeah, we need to be in Florida next week. And then we might go, it might be a good idea to go the next week too. Or we stay for, a few days and have multiple meetings. And that's cool if that's every once in a while and it makes sense, but they're doing it for no real reason. Other than we don't really want to be on Zoom. I'd rather be in person because I feel more comfortable interacting in person.
I'm going to add on to what you're saying. Yeah. Because I think like anything, there's balance. Yeah. There's both. What that rep is doing is getting a feel for the organization. How to navigate, right? Because that practitioner or engineer that you're working with remotely, there's few times where they can really make that decision themselves. Or they can at a certain price point or a certain, this is a 30K or 40K type of thing and it's and we're going to integrate it. But when it becomes, a larger enterprise, so you're talking about, that spectrum of, making 40. Yeah. When it becomes, there is both, I think, needed because you do need to help navigate. I'm trying to think of some examples, but
I have a ton of examples. I can say why I still think that what the rep's doing is the right thing to try and do, and I also think. Yeah, it's nonsense that they need to do it in person. Yeah. Like they don't have the skill set to do it remotely. That's the problem.
You know what this reminds me of? Good. I know you watch a little bit of The Office. You've probably seen like 4 episodes in your entire life. Just all of both it. Of you two. Really?
Yes.
Oh, there we go.
It took me forever to get past episode 1.
It's a bad episode.
Because my wife and I was like, why is everybody like this? Like, I watched 24 and The Office like 3 years ago. But then I just didn't I've seen Okay, go ahead.
It reminds me of the issue, and mind you, they're filming this in like the mid 2000s. So it's the crossover of Dunder Mifflin going virtual, Oh, we got websites. We're losing business to Staples, the big box stores. And then Michael, who has this old school salesman. I got cue cards on your kids and their birthdays. I know little Susie cheerleads and she's allergic to almonds. I know these things. And it was this polarizing difference that you can't have both.
Yeah.
And I think, to your point, there's no reason at this point in time we can't have both. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to still interface in that same manner without it having to be in person.
I think it depends who you're selling to.
Reps don't know how to do both. Okay,
Yeah.
reps that have been in the game for 20 plus years don't know how to do both. It's fine. Look, it just don't tell me it's not possible.
Fair.
Okay,
I'm
we
always
had to
a
do it.
always
We
a
had
bit
to
of
do
that.
it a lot during COVID. We did it successfully, and it's different than when you're in person and you go in there and you're walking in. You'll just see other people in the organization naturally, right? And so you'll be like, "Oh, this is how this organization is built out. I've got to talk with them, introduce to them."
It's a water.
That's
it's a
what
water
the feeling
cooler.
out looks like. Like,
you
okay, you work in this department. Okay, and then that may be a potential like sale later on. Who knows? These are different people. I get that, but here's the thing: I'm on a remote call, right? I'm helping someone solve a real problem. They solve that real problem. Now all of a sudden, I'm talking to them casually, whether that be text or phone call or whatever, outside of a work Zoom call. They feel comfortable with me. So now I'm like, I've had this experience with multiple customers where I'm like, why aren't you doing this way? Like, why are you doing this way? What's like, who's telling you that you have to do this way? And they're like, oh, we get pressure from XYZ to do this that way. And then, we have to adhere to XYZ and la, la, la. He was like, oh yeah, I know it's dumb, but it's something that we have to do. Okay. Like, what do those people actually care about? Have you had that conversation? Have you talked with them? They're like, actually, no, I haven't really talked with them. You should have that conversation.
Yeah.
If you need my help with the conversation, great. If not, do that. But that's going to keep coming up in me and you talking.
Yeah.
Because it's a problem, right? And that has led to people literally going to their bosses' bosses, us getting exposed to different segments in the org just because of one interaction. Mm-hmm. Now, let alone when I'm on a meeting with 5-10 people, hey, I'm doing the thing remotely, right? This is a remote water cooler, right? So now I'm making these personal connections. They're able to confide in me. Instead of being in a steak dinner, we were, whatever. Maybe they game or something. Mm-hmm. They do something else. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, let's, I'll hop on the game or whatever. It's the same exact thing. Is my point.
So how real estate has really shifted the industry, right? What percentage, though, of real estate do you think is happening without a realtor in person showing a house where it's all digital? Because it is a thing, and it's shifting. But I mean, what percentage would you say?
I don't know the percentage. I don't know the stats, but I think it's a poor example. Well,
here's the reason why. There's two things that I see as similar with it. Mm-hmm. The first is, who are you selling to as a realtor? If you're selling to a broker, then and what segment of the market are you selling? Are you selling a $20 million house, or are you selling a $10,000 house? Right? Mm-hmm. Those things matter, right? Yeah. And and I would argue, I think I have no basis for this, but other than just gut, but I think as the higher end sale you get, it's probably going to decrease the percentage of digital. I haven't touched this, I just bought it, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that there is a shift. For instance, I bought our house without a realtor. Mm-hmm. I've done things enough where it was somewhat of a digital transaction. I'm like, I'll get a lawyer. I understand due diligence and I do care. So I think it's there, but the realtor, depending on what they're selling and who they're selling to, needs both. And I would agree with you that I think it's shifting.
Yeah, the argument isn't if they need both. My argument is the frequency of that need. And I think that the frequency of what you need at what time is based on who you're talking to, like you're saying, and what the strategic conversation is in that moment. My main statement is that the frequency is dramatically less than it used to be.
Agreed.
They're not planning
Agreed on that.
strategically.
Like that's what I'm saying. That it's a shift.
Like, I'm gonna give the people an example of like when I would think it's a great idea to go in person. Okay, because obviously I'm an advocate for doing things very much so remotely. if I have an executive, which you do, when we're at a very large customer and I'm interacting with engineers, if I'm interacting with engineers, architects, any type of technical persona, I don't need to really see you in person. I'm good. I'm good. I can do this remotely. I have the skill set to also foster a relationship remotely, right? That's just the benefit of being a little younger and being used to that. But I have that skill set. Now, when we progress to a certain point, if I meet an executive level person, a senior director level person, someone who in our world signs the checks, right? And they feel more comfortable having certain discussions in person, and you present it as an idea to them and they're very receptive, go in person and have that meeting. That's a great strategic point in building a relationship with a customer that you should go in person. Outside of that, which that may happen only I've once or twice, 3 times a year.
I was gonna say, so the default in this case is virtual.
Default is virtual.
The default is that we can handle this through the tools we have.
I think he's answering it from his lens, and that lens makes,
and I think,
a lot of
but
sense.
people, that's if you have that skill set. The problem is in sales, people make very polarizing statements, and a lot of sales reps have the opinion, you cannot do this if you're not doing in-person things.
I would disagree with that.
Yeah, and I disagree with it. What we're talking about is a middle ground, right? And that middle ground, we've actually, I think, accomplished in a large way. That's why we're able to work so well together.
But things have shifted so much as well.
The
In a large, in the
this
last
whole
2 years, there was a pandemic that forced.
So let's advance the conversation. How does a person gather those skills?
I think you need to become more comfortable with technology. I think you need to become, like, the things that were natural for us growing up, you have to just become more comfortable with chatting in different venues, understanding what apps appeal to what culture.
Okay.
Right? Like, Discord is a very specific type of culture and application.
Absolutely.
Like, you're more in gaming mode, just talking, chilling, hanging out mode. Slack is much more like, hey, it can be casual, but it's a little more official. Like, maybe we're doing a little more corporate vibe. I don't usually take calls on Slack. Right? Zoom can be any of it. If I'm in a Zoom meeting and I'm just spinning up something quick for a personal one-on-one, then that's pretty chill. That's a more personal one-on-one. Anything above that, usually Zoom's handle in a more official capacity for larger meetings or Google Meet, whatever it is you're using your tool. Understand what tools appeal to what sides of people. Right? There's different things that you can do. When you progress to the point of a text conversation, in our world, if you get a person's number in any capacity in text conversation, you've kind of potentially entered into a friendly space. I think that's similar for you. Even if you were calling people back in the day, you were in a more personal space.
Text is I think text is like you've made it.
Forget
phone, but like text is like, okay.
Back in the day, that was even the case. If you had a phone call with a customer, you could just call them up and y'all were talking casually. That's another level of relationship.
Yeah.
There's so much more. There are so many more pieces of technology now that have those same type of meanings associated with them that you can use as tools when you're interacting with people.
It is funny, at HashiCorp, they actually had a session on that, right? Because they're remote first, and a lot of us came from a different type of environment. Now, you have to understand, in sales, we haven't been in an office, and I haven't been in an office in 15, 17 years because we're out in the field, right? Yeah. So we're never usually in a corporate setting anyway, right? Yeah. So we're kind of right. Out on the street, but they had a session on that, like different tools, and this is how you use Slack, and so that you can engage. Yeah, I like I said, to me, it kind of 10 years ago, somebody you wouldn't buy a house without a realtor in person.
Yeah.
10 years ago, that would be like insane, like unless you're some, rich, and you're like, who cares, right?
Give me the house.
But and the realtor, for that reason, it's all in person. It's all those type of things. I mean, the shift is clearly there. And the realtor better now understand both of those domains. Indeed. And I would say, yes, through time, it's going to go more digital and more. And so they better adapt. And I would agree with you. In my world, it's the same shift. In the sense that 10 or 15 years ago, you wouldn't buy anything without
some type of
looking at someone in the eyes.
Want to shake his hand.
But part of shift. So I think, and to your point, you need both. And to add on the learning, like how do you learn it? You were asking. I think it's the same thing that we've been talking about. You better recognize that you need to learn it.
All right, so we're about
Whoa.
an hour and a half in, and I want to get into wrapping it up. So if closing advice, anyone who's in sales, looking to be in sales, like tech sales in general, any closing words or advice to them? Anything you would tell them getting into the field now?
I mean, I'm still figuring out myself. Like like these times now I've never seen.
Always be learning.
No, I'm just saying this environment in every industry. I mean, I've seen this like early on, early on in the heyday when things were great, we could buy, when I was in IT, we could buy any tool, any fun thing, and nobody would ask. Like, it would just be shelfware or like, this is just cool. And then there was, the crashes, and you had to justify everything. But I think right now, things are they're so volatile. Every industry, if you're on the customer side or if you're on the sales side, that my advice and what I'm trying to do in terms of sustainability is you better understand quantifiably what you're doing has a massive impact. Mm-hmm. Or on the customer side, you're not needed.
Yeah.
And or on the sales side, you're not going to sell. So I think the time, I've had to put my brain back into my old days of, dedicated, like, I got to take in knowledge this week.
Yeah.
I got to learn, it was a leading question earlier, but, I probably ask you, hey, what book should I read next? I'm constantly asking that, mm-hmm. I think it's old, but if you're transitioning, the quickest way to understand is Phoenix Project. I think Phoenix Project, it like how it's done, it really gives you an understanding of what. So that was a long thing. My advice would be any domain, empathy. Do you care about who you're talking to? And that care should lead you enough to learn and to understand what people go through, process. We always talk about that. And I think if you do that, then you're sustained through these times. And when these times come out, you're making $1.5 million a year.
Awesome. I think it's a great way to close it out.
Absolutely.
We appreciate you coming on, David.
Are we off?
Oh, not off yet, but
I was gonna say off record. This is
say it anyway.
Well, just edit it out. I told you not to. It's not live, but no, like really good job. Like as an old head, I guess. I am right. Like
you're old.
Yeah, my knee hurts.
Yeah.
We these podcasts and stuff, and I've been tuning into them. Yours and others, but it is very insightful. Maybe if I could have gone back to answer your question, like listen to more podcasts, like because I forgot that the camera's here. Like I don't feel like.
It was funny, like before you came on, you were a little nervous.
Yeah,
I'm like,
bro. I'm like,
this is chill, man.
I had a script. I want to give a shout out to, Ken Doherty. What's up? What I'm saying? Like all the people who got me. What I'm saying? But yeah, I think it's interesting. I think about that's probably a big thing now is you get people who are doing something that you want to learn about in these environments, and you. And you listen to it.
Thing,
yeah.